Hello, I'm William King, and this is One Small Step for Man. On the 15th of December 2015, Major Tim Peake became the first British astronaut to travel to the International Space Station.
Dawn on the snow-sprinkled steppes of Kazakhstan, and the rocket that will take the first British astronaut to the space station is making its
second service tower separation.
Good afternoon and welcome to BBC News. For nearly 4 hours now, the British astronaut Tim Peake has been orbiting the Earth on board a Russian Soyuz spacecraft. But first came this.
10 seconds nominal. Copy, feeling well.
Further afield, British astronaut Tim Peake has left Earth for the International Space Station. He blasted off earlier, giving the thumbs up after a successful launch as he went into orbit.
He may have travelled the 408-kilometre journey up to reach the International Space Station. He may have been awarded his Army Flying Wings in 1994. And he may have written a best-selling children's book. But Major Tim Peake has not been to the Isle of Man. Yet. This year, all being well, that will change when Tim brings his tour, My Journey to Space, to the Villa Marina in March. I caught up with Tim just before Christmas and we chatted about how his tour's been going, the space industry, climate change and commercial space travel.
Hi, I'm Tim Peake and I'm a British astronaut who flew with the European Space Agency to the International Space Station.
You're on a bit of a pause now. You've been on a tour around the UK, and how's it been going so far?
It's been brilliant. It's been great after, the periods of lockdown to finally get out and about, to start touring around, to see people in person. And it's been brilliant to kind of see the buzz and the atmosphere that there is around space at the moment. Space has always been fascinating for so many people. But I think right now, we're entering this new era of space exploration. There's a lot of exciting things happening. And I've really kind of got that impression when I've been speaking to people.
And you've been doing this since October, so a couple of months now. Does it get boring at all, or do you get the same questions asked, that sort of thing, or does it manage to stay a bit varied a little bit?
Yeah, no, it doesn't get boring at all. I'm hugely passionate about what I talk about space, and I think the more people you can share it with, the better. And every venue is different. It's great to be able to meet people, and it's great to be able to kind of share what was a fascinating story for me, and I hope a fascinating story for so many people. So absolutely not. No, I love it every time I do the show.
Does it make you miss being in space doing this tour?
It does. I mean, there's a part of the tour where I kind of take people on an orbit of planet Earth, and those photographs from the cupola window are just unbelievable. It takes me back there every time I do it, to looking down on the planet and seeing those views. So yes, it will always be a huge part of my life, and it's an experience that is unforgettable. So every time I talk about it, it takes me back. So
you're coming to the Isle of Man in March. Was there any reason you wanted to go to the Isle of Man, or it's just one of the venues that was on a list and you thought that would be nice to go and see? Well,
we're trying to get around the length and breadth of the country, and absolutely the Isle of Man obviously has an important space heritage as well. And I flew some stamps on board the International Space Station during my mission, which were from the Isle of Man. And so, I've never been, and I would absolutely love to come and visit.
So you've never been to the Isle of Man. Did you see it from above when you were looking down over the British Isles at all?
Very much so. That's what I find really strange, is that there's literally nowhere on the planet where people can talk about that I haven't been able to see. I remember having a conversation with somebody who'd spent a few months trekking around Madagascar, and I felt I knew the place as well as they did, because I'd looked down so many times and photographed it. It's a stunning island. So yes, absolutely. I've seen the Isle of Man in great detail from space.
I know there are plenty of people on the island very much looking forward to welcoming you. You mentioned the Isle of Man's got some space heritage there. I wonder if you're aware of the sort of current contributions the island's making to the space industry.
There are plenty of satellite companies on the island at the minute. I think in 2010, somebody on a list somewhere named the Isle of Man the fifth most likely place to put a man on the moon. That hasn't happened yet. I wonder, the point is that quite a lot of these places are upping and leaving, or some of them are anyway. Is there anything you think at the moment, the way space is going as an industry, that the Isle of Man as a place could be doing in the industry to strengthen its hand in the field?
What's interesting right now is, I mentioned this new era of space exploration, but really we're in a new era of space utilization as well. So at the same time that the big national space agencies are looking to return to the moon in the next few years and then go on to Mars, building things like the Lunar Gateway in orbit around the moon, which is going to be really exciting, and working in conjunction with private companies to be able to do that. This is this kind of space exploration program, and that offers up opportunities for business and for industry. But I think more than that, it's kind of what we call new space. It's the utilization of low Earth orbits, the fact that the cost of access to space has now come down dramatically by reusability, sustainability of rockets. And we're looking to launch in 2022 from UK soil, which is really exciting, into orbit. Hopefully the first European country to achieve that. And what we're doing there is sort of small satellite technology in a polar orbit, which is great for things like Earth observation. And that's also where, new space can get involved, things like in-orbit servicing, in telecommunications, in downstream applications, managing all that data from climate change, for example, that we get from space. There's so many opportunities. Space is a massively growing sector. And I think that's where any company can really embrace in terms of innovation and creativity to come up with new ideas as to how we can use space to the advantage of everybody back here on Earth.
So you mentioned the advantage to the planet Earth there. There's obviously the counter-argument, which is that the Earth is in its own bit of a pickle at the moment, and should we be channeling our energies into going beyond that when there's a case for sorting out our own planet first? What do you say to that?
You can't sort out your own planet if you can't look at it and know what the planet is up to, and you do that from space. So space is absolutely integral to protecting the planet for the future. In terms of climate change, I mentioned there about Earth observation. Well, more than 50% of our data on climate change comes from small satellites in low Earth orbit, and that's essential for giving us very rapid answers to things like where is methane being reduced, pockets of methane on an hourly basis, carbon dioxide plumes, if the permafrost is starting to melt in Siberia, if peatlands are starting to emit more carbon, then we need to know that right now. And there are so many things going on with climate change at the moment that our scientists cannot predict, and our politicians cannot make decisions if they're not well informed, and space enables us to be well informed. And at the same time, space is actually a very low carbon emitter. I know when people watch rockets launch and they think there's an awful lot of carbon being emitted into the atmosphere with a big smoky rocket launch, the majority of that is actually water vapor. If you're burning hydrogen and oxygen on a rocket, and hydrogen is one of the best fuels that you can use, and liquid oxygen is of course the best oxidizer, then you're producing water vapor. You're not producing carbon. Now, some rockets do use kerosene, which does have a carbon element, but even so, it's absolutely minimal compared to the aviation industry. As an example, the Soyuz rocket that I launched to space on emitted the same amount of carbon dioxide as 3 hours on a 747 jet, not even halfway across the Atlantic for one jet. So that puts it into perspective of kind of the carbon output.
So do you think, you mentioned before as well about the price of space, the cost of going into space, whether that's low Earth orbit, coming down. Is that risky, sending more and more people into space? When I look at a rocket ship going up, clearly there is a risk associated with that. Is there a problem with space becoming over-commercialised?
Well, I think you're touching on a couple of different areas there. In terms of risk, yes, there is clearly a risk to human health, as in rockets can fail, rockets can explode, and there is a danger of a catastrophic malfunction there. So if somebody wishes to take that risk, they need to understand what they're doing. And as we move into an era of commercial companies flying customers into space, then that's obviously something that they have to deal with in terms of their risk mitigation by having a very thorough, robust test and evaluation plan that makes the risk as low as reasonably practicable. But it's a risk that obviously many people are willing to take, myself included, to fly into space. Now, obviously, my mission was a scientific mission for a 6-month mission on the space station. Now you've got customers who can pay for a short experience into a suborbital experience, still into space, but then just for minutes at a time and then returning to Earth. And in terms of the second point that you touched on there, as not just a risk to human health, the risk of over-commercialization of space, it is something that we need to be aware of, and we need to make sure that we regulate that activity in accordance with international agreements where we actually follow in terms of not just the utilization of space, but also things like space debris, where if we're talking about putting satellites into orbit, what methods are there for returning them either back to Earth or burning up in the atmosphere or disappearing further out into space where there won't be a problem for future generations to come. So that's something that we need to look at the level of the United Nations and make sure that we're adequately regulating, controlling space so that we protect it as an environment for the future.
And there's so much of this going on. What would surprise you if the billionaires of the world came out and said, we are doing this, and it made you go, oh my goodness? What do you think that would be? Or do you think, are we at a stage where anything's possible and we can just expect the unexpected?
We're at a stage now where we can expect some remarkable things to happen in a short space of time, because space is starting to move beyond just the boundaries of wealthy nations and just the boundaries of state-sponsored space agencies like NASA, like the European Space Agency, like Roscosmos. We now have a vibrant private sector that is accelerating the pace of what we can do. Now, at the moment, the Artemis program, returning astronauts to the surface of the moon, that is a program very much that companies such as SpaceX are involved in providing pieces of equipment that are on the critical path to that, the lunar lander, for example. And SpaceX has ambitions to send humans to Mars, possibly in a more ambitious time frame than even NASA. So this is where we could see in the future that commercial companies are pushing the space agencies to keep up with where they're going, and that's going to be exciting. It's going to require novel technologies in terms of propulsion, in terms of protection for crew, but it's completely achievable. I mean, there's nothing about a Mars mission that is not achievable. It's just a case of getting on and doing it.
I'm William King, and you're listening to One Small Step for Man, a conversation I recorded with British astronaut Tim Peake just before Christmas. He's coming to the Isle of Man in March. In this part of the programme, I handed the microphone to the Year 6 children of Victoria Road Primary School.
In Castletown!
They had so many excellent questions, and I am truly sorry we could only include a few of them in this programme. I also asked Manx astronomer Howard Parkin if he wanted to send a message to Tim. First up, it's over to Junior.
Hi Tim, my name is Junior, and my question is, what made you want to go to space?
Hey, well, that's a good question. What made me want to go to space? I think for me, it was something that later on in life, when I realized I had the opportunity as a test pilot, I just thought it was the most incredible area to work in for a number of reasons. Firstly, because you're working with so many other people around the world on something that is so important, where you can really make a difference and you can really benefit people back on Earth. But actually, who doesn't want to go to space? You're in weightlessness. You're looking down on the planet. It's incredible. It's awesome. You're riding a rocket. You're pushing the boundaries of technology. For me, it just seemed like the most exciting thing I could do, as well as the most rewarding thing.
That was a great question from Junior. We've got a slightly related one next.
Hi Tim, my name is Charlie and my question is, how long do astronauts have to train to go into space?
Hi, Charlie. Well, training for a space mission is quite a long process. I trained for 6 years before flying to space from being selected, but you can do it in about 3 years. The reason why I was taking longer is I was waiting for my chance to go into space, because in Europe we only have one astronaut fly about every year, sometimes two astronauts in a year. So there's also a waiting process there. So I reckon 3 years is probably about the minimum amount of training between selection and ending up in space. So there's an awful lot to learn. That's why it takes so much time.
Let's talk briefly about education, stemming from that question from Charlie there. What do you think about the importance of teaching science, technology, STEM subjects in schools?
Well, STEM subjects are incredibly important for to be taught in schools and for young people to embrace at an early stage. A couple of reasons for that, really. And the first reason is that it will absolutely open doors for your future. When you look at the careers that are around today, many of them didn't exist when I was at school. And likewise, my young boys who are at school today will be going into careers that possibly don't exist today, but they're all underpinned by science and technology. And it's the pace of change of technology that is incredible today. So it doesn't matter if you're going to do something in music, in radio, in art, in drama, in literature, as well as more traditional STEM-based technologies, if it's into science and engineering. But you're going to be surrounded by technology, so it's really important to get involved. And I think that's the primary thing is it's going to give you opportunities for the future. And the second thing I think in terms of STEM-based skills, well, they're fascinating. It's about understanding the world around you. It's about understanding your environment, asking questions and being curious. And I think that's a really important element in anybody's education, is to ask those scientific questions and understand the scientific principle.
We have a company on the Isle of Man called Mann, which was founded by a person who we think you may have a link to, and we will come to that in a second. They send students from the Isle of Man to NASA United Space Summer School each year. What about those sorts of projects? How valuable can they be for people?
I think they're incredibly valuable. For me, when I was younger, it was the cadets at school that was a massive inspiration in terms of becoming involved in aviation, which set me on the career path of becoming an astronaut. And whatever it is that you're excited, these extracurricular activities, if it's some sort of summer camp for a space school, if it's a sport, if it's computer coding, whatever it is that kind of lights that fire and gives you that passion. These are the things that can really shape your future, and they can inspire you for so many years to come. So I think it's incredibly important that people have the opportunity to explore different avenues when they're younger and find out what it is that they're really passionate about and what it is that they want to do.
Let's come back to another child now from Castletown.
Hi Tim, my name is Evie and my question is, can you see weather from up in space?
Hi Evie, great question, and yes you can. What's incredible from space is you see about a 2,000 kilometer radius, and so you'll start to see small storms, for example, forming out in the Atlantic that then in 3 or 4 orbits time they might have developed into small hurricanes, and then a few days later they might be hitting the west coast of Florida, for example. So we see major weather events from space. We see dust storms that are picked up over the Sahara that spread across Portugal, across Spain, even making it as far as the United Kingdom. And then we see space weather events, so solar flares that then create the aurora, the northern lights, aurora borealis, aurora australis, and the greater the solar activity, then the more intense that aurora is. So we see weather on a huge scale, and to see thunderstorms from space is incredibly impressive at nighttime. You realize just how vibrant our atmosphere is, and how much energy is in our atmosphere in terms of an electrical storm. It's unbelievable to see that from space. Thousands of lightning strikes in the period of a couple of minutes across massive storm fronts.
And this is the type of thing you were mentioning before that we can't see like this without the element of space and the space industry. And that's one of the things that helps us learn and move forwards as a planet.
Absolutely, it does. And also we can now monitor the change as well. So, how are these weather systems changing? How are the winds shifting in the upper atmosphere? How frequent are major storms, for example, and where are they occurring? And this is what space can do in terms of tracking this movement and trying to identify how the planet is changing and what the potential consequences of those changes might be.
Right, I've got one more question from a pupil at Victoria Road Primary School.
Hi Tim, my name is Jacob and my question is, do you think there is life in space?
Hello Jacob, that's a great question. Absolutely, I do believe that there is life in space. When you see, when you're on a spacewalk and you look out and you see 200 billion stars in the Milky Way, you think just in our galaxy alone, 200 billion stars, and the majority of those stars will have planets. The stars are formed from material, and the material in stars is mostly gas, and so there'll be solid material. So you'll have rocky planets nearer the stars, and then you'll have gaseous planets further away. So out of 200 billion stars, are we supposed to assume that there are no other rocky planets, orbiting in an orbit where liquid water can survive? And we know that water is abundant even in our own solar system. So we assume that water is abundant elsewhere in the universe. And then we also know that the building blocks of life are abundant in our solar system in terms of carbon compounds, for example. So we have all these ingredients for life out there in the universe. And I think what is a difficult step when you look at our own evolution, and of course we only have our own evolution to look at, we were on planet Earth, we were single-celled life forms. We were very, very basic life forms for a very, very long time, for about 3 billion years before making that leap into more complex life. So I do think that complex life, like ourselves, that can think, that are conscious, I think we're a lot rarer, a lot more rare than other life forms in the universe. But I think the universe is teeming with life. The question is space just too vast? Will we ever find out if anything else is out there because of time and because of distance?
Thank you very much, Tim, and thanks to Jacob for that excellent question. So I mentioned before about Mann Sat. It was co-founded by a man called Christopher Stott. And I'm going to play a message now. There's a man on the Isle of Man who is very much an astronomical and a general space expert. He's called Howard Parkin and has just won the Sir Patrick Moore Prize from the British Astronomical Association. I told Howard I would be speaking to you, and he's recorded this message.
Great to speak to you, Tim. I've been following your exploits for many years and read your book, and it's a fascinating book. And what is fascinating is we almost became good friends with Tim Copra, who I know you went up to the ISS with on the Soyuz. And Tim Copra's crewmate on the space shuttle STS-133 was Nicole Stott. And Nicole Stott is, of course, a friend of our society. She's married to a Manxman. I suspect you may know Nicole. And we'd just like to invite you to come up to the Isle of Man Astronomical Society Observatory anytime when you're here. We'd love to see you because we've had lots of visits by various astronomers, astronauts and cosmonauts over the years. And it would just be great to see you. But we're looking forward to your talk immensely. And I hope you have a great time on the Isle of Man. And hopefully we might see you again on the Isle sometime soon.
That's a fantastic message from Howard. Thank you very much for that invitation, and I certainly hope to take you up on it. And yes, of course, Chris and Nicole are good friends, and we keep in touch often. So yeah, no, I'd love to come and visit. Thank you.
Thanks to Howard Parkin, the children of Victoria Road Primary School, and Mr. Palmer for their contributions, and University Radio York for helping me out with recording the interview. And of course, thanks to Tim for lending us his valuable time. Tim Peake visits the Isle of Man on the 19th of March.